1, 2, 1, 2. We recorded Vitalization in Los Angeles at Robert Biles' studio called Bob's Hardware. And Bob has been our engineer for many years. He's engineered, couldn't even tell you, like 6 or 7 of the Vital Information recordings. And for years he used to come on the road with us and do the sound live. And it was probably the first time you'd worked with Bob.
I worked with him at Yoshi's too.
You did, right, when he did our live sound at Yoshi's. And Bob has not the biggest studio, so we had to set up in a way like I was in a small room, a drum booth, and then Tom was in another little room, and then you were in the hallway.
Right.
Which was an interesting guitar setup because like you had the speakers at either end of the room.
Two amps on either end of the room, yeah.
Baron was direct, but he was sitting in the drum room so we could really hook up. And then Bob would record everything to a hard drive. And once we got a take that we'd like, he'd bounce it over to his Nuendo, and then we'd overdub and edit and whatever we had to do in that regard. And Vinny got involved quite a bit with the editing and helping with some of the overdubs and things like that. Because Bob's an analog guy, and he's just getting with the digital world at this point. The way that we approached recording was to do 1 tune a day. That was our goal, is to get 1 tune done a day, which sounds in the jazz world quite luxurious because a lot of times people make records in 1 day or maybe 2 days, the whole record. But these type of records, what you call like a jazz fusion record, is somewhere between a real stone cold straight ahead bebop record and a rock record. It's somewhere in between, and we go for a live, spontaneous recording, and then we polish it if it's a little rough around the edges. And so we would go into the studio if the tune, even though we'd been playing some of the tunes, when you put them under the microscope, sometimes you hear, oh, this is a little loose over here, or we're not really positive, what's going on in this part of the tune. So first, we usually tighten it up a little bit, go for a take, and try to get as spontaneous a take as possible. Get hopefully a great drum track all the way through, bass track, solos, melodies, and the like. And in the case where all the solos aren't like absolutely smoking all the way through, but we do have a good drum track and bass track, we'll work with that. And then what we did is finished off keyboard solos or guitar solos, bass solos, even in some cases drum solos. I'd punch in if I didn't have a solo that I was completely happy with. I'd punch in and work it until it felt really great. So
it was definitely a new experience and a tense experience at times, because you're not, where the jazz approach that I have been so used to and recorded all my records like that is you go for a feeling and you go for a mood, and you capture that first. And if there's anything to be redone, it's just new. It's just a note here and there, fixes here and there that might have been mistakes, but don't necessarily ruin the take. And you almost go for this complete take, so, and then coming back to the way that we did it, it was just a matter of adjusting to the concept of, okay, let's get the overall sound and everything really polished, and then we'll go for the pieces that need to be fit into the puzzle with that. And towards the end of the process, I think I was kind of feeling like, okay, I'm getting this now. I'm getting it together here. And,
well, yeah, because see, we've gone through. I've gone through really full circle with this. With the early days of Vital Information, way back in the early '80s, we would do our records like really a jazz record. We go in and we play, and that like the first record with Dean Brown and Tim Landers, Mike Stern, David Wilczewski, and myself. Those are pretty much what you hear is what we played. We might have fixed the melody or something like that, but they were pretty loose. Then there came a period in the mid '80s where everything was on the computer. You know, so the computer track would be done, and the drums would overdub to that, and the bass would overdub to that, and that felt like it took the life out of things. That was more of like, say, a pop way of doing it. But then I started with this somewhere in between where we go for a complete track, the best track we can possibly get, and then if we need to redo a solo, I don't have an aesthetical problem with redoing stuff like that, because the end result, it's like making a movie or something. You want something that is powerful and you can listen to over and over and over again, and it'll always sound exciting, and it'll always sound great. And there is a fine line between overdoing it so it's sterile, or just finding that fine line. As a producer, I'm riding that fine line of pushing people till I get their most exciting and seat of the pants kind of work, but still that it really is listenable.
I guess the thing that was kind of transitional for me was the interplay with the band during a solo is basically just moved around a little bit, because in a situation where old school jazz, you're focusing on that interplay at the moment, on the spot, and whatever happens, like you said. It sometimes can be loose, and in the case of some old Miles records and some of the classic records, you hear that looseness, but it doesn't ruin the classicness of the track. And with this, what the interplay that I ended up learning to kind of focus on was that was already there in the track and in the place of the track, and that in a way becomes another jazz approach. It's also that way, because so much of what we know of jazz is improvisation on a group level. If we improvise to a track, it's still improvisation on a group level, because what's there has been improvised, and then what you're doing to it is improvising to that. And so definitely the adjustment was for me was that actual process.
Right.